Hello? Hello. I'm gonna mess this up for everyone else who's probably taller than me, but we'll figure it out. Hi, welcome everybody to the Poetry Society of America. I'm Sally. Thank you. I'm Sally Fullerton. I'm the development manager here, and it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's reading, which celebrates the winner of our 2025 Chapbook Fellowship Prize and more broadly marks 23 years of the fellowship program through an evening of readings from both current and past fellows. For those of you who are new to the Poetry Society of America, let me share just a word about the organization. Founded in 1910, the PSA is the nation's oldest poetry organization, with a mission to bring poetry to the crossroads of American life. Through a slate of public programs, from placing poems on the subway to our annual poetry awards, the organization continues to expand poetry's place in the public imagination. Among its signature initiatives is the Chapbook Fellowship, established in 2003, which has helped launch the career of more than 80 poets, many of whom have gone on to shape the landscape of contemporary poetry. Tonight, we have the privilege of welcoming 3 poets who illustrate the depth and longevity of the Chapbook Fellowship. To celebrate the success and longevity and legacy of the fellowship, we're excited to present poets from across its history. Cecily Parks, whose chapbook was selected in 2005 by Young Lee. Isabella DeSendi, whose chapbook Through the New Body was selected in 2019 by Evie Shockley, and David Gorin, who, along with Luke Allen, is the recipient of this year's prize. Copies of David Gorin's winning chapbook To a Distant Country and Luke Allen's Sweet Dreams the Sea, Cecily Parks' chapbook and her forthcoming collection The Seeds, and Isabella DeSendi's chapbook and just released debut Someone Else's Hunger will be available for purchase after the reading. We invite you to stay, browse, talk to one another, and join us in kicking off the Brooklyn Book Festival, for which this is an official off-site event. So we're going to start with our first reader, which is this year's recipient of the fellowship, David Gorin. David Gorin is a poet, critic, and educator. His work has appeared in A Public Space, The Believer, Best American Experimental Writing, Boston Review, the PEN America series, and elsewhere. His writing has received the Emily Dickinson Award from the Poetry Society of America and been supported by MacDowell and Malay Arts. In 2023, he was named a runner-up for the 92Y Discovery Prize. He holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and an MA and MPhil in English Literature from Yale University. In recent years, he has taught creative writing and literature at the Pratt Institute, Deep Springs College, Eastern Correctional Facility via the Bard Prison Initiative, McDougall Walker Correctional Institution via the Yale Education Initiative. Gorin's chapbook To a Distant Country was selected by this year's judge, Jennifer Chang. In her introduction to Gorin's work, Chang writes, Gorin's poems disarm us with guileless transparency. His imagery is crystalline, his diction radiantly direct, and that Gorin forms an intimacy with his reader where we can share in a kind of experience that we hope for most from reading poems. It's my pleasure to welcome David Gorin.
Can you all? Is it better for the internet if I use the microphone? Yes. Okay. I will cave. I'll use the microphone. Hi everyone. It's a great joy to be with you here tonight. Thank you to Sally and everyone at the Poetry Society, and especially to Brett, who I should say I feel like has bookended my life as a poet, because Brett at A Public Space published my very first poem in the public sphere, at the national level. And so to work with him and everyone at PSA on this book has really been amazing. So thank you, everyone. Give it a try. Okay, beautiful. Okay. Here, actually, you know what? I'm going to be an adult and leave it in the thing. Okay. This poem's called A Moon's Moon. Snow is supposed to be in the cold. Ash is supposed to be in the past. Snow is supposed to be on earth. Ash, scattering in the wind. Ash is supposed to be the snow of fire, enemy of winter's flowers. And winter is supposed to take place on the earth between the fall and spring. It is not supposed to take place on the moon. But when it is winter on the moon, when you are writing a poem in it, taking care to sweep it free of ash and snow, to cut down any spruces that spring up in the way, disposing also of wind and junipers and summer sounds, you will now and then look up and see a cloudy planet floating in the sky. It's about the size of your fist at arm's length. Dusty continents cartwheel into view. Then oceans serenely take their place. There must be people taking a subway. There must be mornings and situations. A girl walking her bicycle across the street. A graduate student in prayer on the floor of a hospital chapel. A track team running to the vanishing point and back. A basketball game the whole neighborhood turns out to cheer. Poetry readings attended by more than 60 people. It sounds exciting. You picture yourself in a helmet of glass and a silver suit with copper buckles, strapping into the seat of a cockpit aimed at the little world. With a few keystrokes, up you go, lifted by a bright white stream of snow and ash. Of course, this does not actually happen. You are, after all, still seated at your desk on the surface of the moon in winter, which shows no signs of abating, and weeks pass by like windows on a moving train. This next poem I'm going to give to you is the title track of this book, To a Distant Country. It was a poem I wrote the day after getting back from teaching in Shanghai for a summer. While I was teaching in Shanghai, a poet and Nobel Peace Prize winner, Liu Xiaobo, a pro-democracy activist, who had died of cancer in custody of the Chinese government. He had been under house arrest for over a decade with his wife, the poet Liu Xia. And I'd never heard of him before, but someone I met out one night was in tears because he just died and the government was censoring any mention of him. Like, you couldn't text his name to like the person sitting across from you at the table. You couldn't even text the candle emoji. It would be blocked by your WeChat account. And so the day I got back from teaching in Shanghai, I wrote this poem and I wanted to send it. A constraint for the poem was provided by the Chinese government because of this online censorship. You couldn't say the name of this guy. So I needed to write a poem that I could send through the Great Firewall to my friends in Shanghai without getting caught by the censors, endangering them or myself. So this poem does not say the name of Liu Xiaobo. To a Distant Country. The night we met, you cried at the table over a man of no importance. He was in bed. It was this summer. There were walls and a ceiling, women in white coats holding clipboards, a guard outside the door, cicadas 20 floors below. Then he was gone. Maybe he leaked through the walls or the ceiling, a pale fume bound for a cloud. Or he returned to his wife. She would have been at home. in a house they once shared in a nearby city, a house they didn't leave for years. Such was their love. When I flew home weeks later, I think he was seated beside me, just beyond the window, head on an inflated travel pillow, thin hands in his lap. I'd never seen him before, but something told me here was a man of no importance who should be left alone. At such a speed, clouds feel like sandpaper, the teeth of tiny frozen fish. When the cabin lights came on, he disappeared from view. By now, he could be writing a letter to his wife on a grain of rice, could be waiting in line at a border, having his picture taken, his laptop, his name off the internet. He could be ashes scattered on the sea. But I imagine him crossing a street in lower Manhattan, even now, umbrella in one hand, phone in the other, Googling the news, no one to stop him. And somewhere on the Pacific, a pillow with his breath inside, light rain. This is a poem called An Actual Poem. The linden rags of autumn, the autumn of sable windows and companion pieces, that's what this poem should have been about. But April, let's just say it has a way of humiliating you in front of all your friends. And so instead, this poem has become a condom of time, a reluctant officer of the peace, with nowhere to go but down into the contagious privacy of an old wound. Here are, has anyone here studied painting in a university setting? One of us. Has anyone been to a painting crit or been critted as a painter? Okay, well, these are I'm going to give two little tiny poems called Painting Crits, and they were written because I saw the filmmaker Elizabeth Subrin has a film called Shuli, which is it's complicated to explain. Sort of, it's a documentary. There was a documentary that included the feminist thinker Shulamit Firestone that was done in like the 70s or so, before Shulamit Firestone was Shulamit Firestone, when she was a student at the Art Institute of Chicago, and she was like one of 4 students who were in this documentary of 4 art students. And the filmmaker Elizabeth Subrin remade the Shulamit Firestone part of that documentary like in the 90s in a sort of masterful reproduction. And there's a scene of Shulamit Firestone that I saw in Shuli, of her being critiqued by these 4 male art professors, and they're just being total like dirtbag male art professors, and saying like, hey, like so I see you've done these in paint, but like, have you considered drawing? And she's like, no, I wanted to do this in painting. And so these are poems in the voice of a D-bag art professor giving critique. Painting crit. I'm attracted to the smaller one for its refusal to be large. That's realistic. I'm drawn to how it deflates the economy of the field by avoiding representation and abstraction, 2 sides of the same false coin it has thrown into a fountain with its wish. Perhaps it wished to be larger and chose smallness as a protest or shield against a favor it thinks it can't repay. I couldn't possibly, it repeats, and yet its desire for just that seems written on its face, though not in paint. Painting crit. This is my take on the Blazin tradition. Does anyone know the, never mind. The Blazin tradition is a tradition of usually male poets writing about usually female bodies, sort of anatomizing, itemizing the body parts of those female bodies, comparing them favorably to natural and cultural artifacts of high value. The present has not smiled upon this tradition, nor have I. Painting crit. It appears to be a nude reclining on an unmade bed, although she has no torso and the legs are dreams forgotten by the afternoon. The eyes, like cherries from a bowl, have also vanished, and the missing head implies her mind is elsewhere, maybe riding a moonlit unicorn over a burning Guggenheim. In lesser hands, this would have looked half-assed, but yours have lifted her as high as a new moon in a cloudless sky. Okay. I'm going to read a few sections from a long poem that is at the end of this chapbook. All of the other poems that I just recited are in here except for the painting crits, which are not. This is a long poem called "I've Never Disappeared for I've never disappeared for even a single instant," yeah, I'll read a few sections from it and then I'll turn myself over. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your presence. And thank you. This poem owes a great debt to a number of people in this room. My wife Charlotte for holding my hand through the writing of this book, and also to my friend Emily Martin sitting in the back. This poem lived in a drawer until Emily Martin said that she cried at one point when reading it, and that's why I finished it, basically. I've never held a stranger's hand. I've never fallen from a tree. I've never broken glass in an emergency. I have no tattoos. Maybe their absence marks a fear of irreversible decisions. The only things I follow through on easily begin as jokes. When a letter from a friend arrives, I hoard it for a while. I've been mistaken for a different person. Sometimes I go looking for an object I'm holding. I've never touched a soldier's chest. I find it hard to write until just after a long depression. I've never climbed a mountain by myself. In kindergarten, I brought home a large, elaborate craypaw and watercolor portrait of a fish that my classmate had abandoned, a girl named Kate, to whom I never said a word, and presented this to my parents as if it were my work. It hung above our fireplace for the duration of my childhood. And I didn't realize I had not told my parents this story until they read this poem. They're sitting in the back, so you can ask them how that was. When someone asks me why I love them, I can't answer. I suspect some people do things chiefly to tell a story later. I've heard a writer repeat a fact as if he'd known it all his life. I've forgotten all the details. I've taken a book from a shelf and talked with a friend through the hole it made. It is easy to give my full attention to someone I barely know. I have difficulty crying without music. I think of movie scenes without a score as honest. My body wakes me on its own when there's something I need to do in the morning, like today. I find 24 baby spiders crawling on the ceiling. Small and clear, their bodies disappear against the paint, but their shadows flag them. Have I ever waited with all my might? I'm not a monster, cowboy, or paramedic. Once, I felt so lonely living with a partner that I became attached to someone who sat near me at the library, whom I once passed while jogging in a public park, whose Facebook profile I visited each day, a stranger with whom I had never shared a word. I've seen my supervisor drop his pants when we were in his office and alone. In tidy whities, he instructed me to wrap around his waist a thermoactive belt of cloth that was supposed to soothe his back pain. It didn't do much harm. I liked having a story. I went to my first Take Back the Night rally at 14. The experience was heartrending, in part because of the third rail and the voices of the women telling stories, in part because the women who terrified and thrilled me seemed inside of something I could never fully know. I don't like how I look in photographs. My left eye wanders from the lens. I like when parties are long enough for intimacy bubbles. I like falling asleep with one arm raised above my head. I like chocolate, but choose away from chocolate-flavored things. I've lost the desire to snoop in a lover's private writings. I don't want to live with someone's momentary thinking burned into my mind forever. A woman I loved gave a speech to her high school English class about being raped by a stranger. It happened near the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. She was 13. People left the room in tears. Later, we were in a basement watching Good Will Hunting. We started making out. Then she was a little earthquake in my arms. It was like there had been someone in the room with us, someone who could walk through my body as easily as if it were a door. I've never felt riddled with alien fibers. I've never cut myself on purpose. Unable to locate a source of pain, I've used my imagination. I'm not a flag or bandage, a briefcase full of money, or a haircut. I love movies where it's just two people talking. I've twisted with jealousy over a lover's ex and learned, years later, she had made him up. I remember she got nervous when she had to play piano in front of other people and what he said and did to calm her down. I crane my neck to look at large windows when I pass them on the street. I like being able to see inside of someone else's building while also looking at myself, and others can't tell which of these you're doing. I'm embarrassed to be seen looking in a mirror. I've never searched a person, never broken into anybody's phone. I grow suspicious of writers who seem proud of sex they've had. Sometimes in the shower, or reading a book, or walking without purpose through the house, I become so enraged at an imaginary interlocutor that I become ashamed, and these two emotions cancel out neatly enough that I might appear to be just taking a shower or reading a book or staring off into space. When I'm angry at an actual person, I grow quiet, cool. Once, I was faithful because I was a coward and too proud. Later, because I learned I could grow bored of anybody if I wasn't careful. I failed to answer a letter in which the typewriter punched a hole in all the periods. When I held the letter in the air, they glowed. I've never disappeared for even a single instant. When a train is passing on a sunny day, I feel the urge to wave. And this is the last one, or the last page. Let's see. The people I have loved have cut themselves. They have starved themselves. They've been punched in the face so hard they needed surgery. They've had sex with people they didn't want. They've had sex with people they weren't supposed to want. They've been asked where they were really from. They hid their drinking from me. They broke into my phone while I was in the shower. They've been terrorized by parts of me they could not see. My desire for intimacy with other people, my failure to be present, my distances. They fantasized about other people when they were with me, cheated on the people they were with before me. They told me that they loved my mind. They married other people. We drove for hours to an apartment of burgundy velvet and expensive cats. We stayed up all night in a hospital waiting room. We slept in a bed among the wires of machines that monitor the heart. We made out in the middle of a lake, and when I got out of the water, I had fish hooks hanging from my shin and foot. At a gas station 2,000 miles from home, we found a bird's nest built under the hood against the engine. We ran around the spiral of a mountain. We saw our dissertation advisor smoking a cigarette on the steps of a liquor store. We went to couples therapy. We walked through a graveyard and talked about the pregnancy. We fought about who should pay the car insurance. We fought about the number of birds in the tree. We fought about the expression on my face. We fought about the time spent in the company of clouds. We fought around the rim of an empty pool. We went to a meeting in the basement of a church. We never got a cartridge for the soda water bottle. We never had a child. We didn't paint the walls a different color. We never read the instruction manual or moved to Nicaragua. We didn't agree on what the cloud resembled. We fell asleep in our clothes with the lights on. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you so much, David. That was really incredible. Our next reader is Isabella DeSendi, who is a Latina poet and educator whose work has appeared in Poetry, the Adroit Journal, Poetry Northwest, and other journals. She is the author of the chapbook Through the New Body, which won the Poetry Society of America's Chapbook Fellowship and was published in 2020. Her debut poetry collection, Someone Else's Hunger, was just released by Four-Way Books on September 15th. DeSendi is a 2025 New Jersey Poetry Fellow, a finalist for the Ruth Lilly Fellowship, and her work was featured in the Best New Poets 2024 anthology. She has attended Bread Loaf Writers Workshop and the Story Knife Writers Residency in Alaska, and she holds an MFA from Columbia University. Of her debut collection, poet Eugenia Lee writes, "Unafraid to examine both the violence done to the self and the violences internalized, DeSendi's scintillating poems flash and slice, but ultimately cut to repair and restore both the self and the reader lucky enough to take refuge in these remarkable pages." Please welcome Isabella DeSendi.
I don't know how I'm supposed to go after David, who memorized all his poems, making us look bad. I'm sorry, I'm so small. Oh boy, is that okay? Is this gonna fall? All right. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Woo! I'm so excited to be with y'all. My book officially launched Monday, so all of this is still really new and exciting. And when my chapbook came out, it came out during COVID through some kind of miracle. And I never got to do like an in-person celebration, so this feels really special. And yeah, also, I believe like my ancestors are always with me. And while I was waiting in line for the bathroom, my eye caught this book. Oh, it's right here. Called like Island of My Hunger, Cuban Poetry. And I'm like, damn, should that have been the title of my book? Maybe, but I fucked up. So anyways, I'm really excited to be here with y'all. I'm just gonna read 4 or 5 poems. I got my little sticky note. And this book is about hunger in sort of a variety of different manifestations. My mom's a Cuban refugee, so thinking about the island of my hunger. I suffered from anorexia and bulimia for a number of years, and so it's also an exploration of what it means to survive that. And then I think a lot too about hunger as desire or desire as hunger, and the way that hunger acts as a motivator to drive us to do things. So I'll just start. I guess all you really need to know about this first poem is my abuela used to practice Santeria, which is like a crazy island religion, which mixes Catholicism and voodoo. One of the, I guess mysticism is a better word, but one of the main practices is animal sacrifice is used, sort of all Judeo-Christian religions, right, as a way to like prove your worth to God. And I think that's all you need to know. Let's start with an epigraph. Welcome. Thanks for coming to poetry on Friday night. You angel. Okay. Last year I abstained. This year I devour without guilt, which is also an art. Margaret Atwood. Once, while disemboweling the chicken, readying it for my lover's dinner, I remembered my abuela slashing the rooster's throat. I was 4, held the wet blade in my hand and cried. For days, the carcass hung like a cross over the red front door until it shriveled and stunk, turned gray as dried petals. Abuela said, "Don't cry." She said, "Be fearless and God-fearing as any white man." So I became just like guajiros carving the air with bright machetes. At home, in school, in America, razors slept in our socks like small slick moons, and hydrangeas bloomed despite the heat while I became a woman. For 20s, my tios chopped weeds with green machines spinning big metal mouths filled with hot blades. You must praise the Lord with your body, abuela said. You must give yourself over as enteros do, without doubt. At every ceremony for the os, I held the white cloth in my hands like a soul. Abuela slashed the bird like a man unbothered. I thought the trick to surviving this country was to be good or beautiful or merciless like its people. But choosing didn't matter. Soon, I'd be pinned on a bed like an animal while someone else's hunger made a sacrifice of me. Of course, I tried to fight him off. But abuela's birds taught me when your arms are pinned behind your back, there's no chance of breaking free. Across the neck, she motioned, like this, as she slid the blade and prayed and ate. How can I forget the hen's throat now? Her pulse ablaze with fear as I combed her feathers neat, placed her gently on the altar. Mira, Isa, You must kill the bird. This is how we speak with saints. This is how we prove our worth. The knife was light. Blood ran through my hands like a storm. I shouldn't have been surprised. It was easier than I thought. Replacing fear with numbness, cleaving the bird's breast in two. Stilled, her wings bent back the way my wrists bent when he cooed me quiet, squeezed my neck, hands warm and strong as a god's. Okay. I think it goes up from here, I hope. Okay, poem for anorexia in April. Am I reading this poem? Hold on. Okay. Poem for anorexia in April. Here was the body, and here was the body rippled with nothingness I couldn't rid. Like an animal caught in the sewer of my life, I couldn't stop picking at my skin, simple, soft waste. Spring's pink garbage strewn into the streets while petals performed their daily adagio down the avenue. I wanted to be like that, flat, punctured with beauty, even if it meant I would never live again. Isn't that what I love most about flowers? Their difference from us, re-emerging despite death, their splendor, perennial sufferance. I'll never forget the shock of hibiscus, those big, ripe heads blooming diurnal against the dark edges of the world. They know what we don't. Our lives are but a single shot of exuberance, then loss. And at the end of loss, what we couldn't unbury, what carried us all the way. Okay, are you guys still with me? Cool. All right. So I was going to read something else, but then David inspired me with his, what were they, paint crits? Painting crits? Crits is such an interesting word. I'm going to have to use that at some point. So there's a couple ekphrastic poems in this book, and this one is called Ars Poetica no Museo do Prado, and it's from this huge painting in this museum in Madrid where it's like supposedly the first pornographic painting ever made, and it's where we get the saying gold showers. So soon as you'll hear, I hope you'll understand why. And it's, Danae's like really going to town on herself, and Zeus is like, ooh, I'm aroused by that. And that's the painting, and they used to hide it behind these like huge red velvet curtains, and people would have to come pay to look behind the curtain. And so when the tour guide was telling us the story, I was like, that's a poem. So this is the poem. At the museum in Madrid, Pablo teaches us about Titian's technique, makes us move around the octagonal room to witness the ways in which a smear of white glaze cast perfectly in the lagoon of Danae's naked armpit highlights the shadows of her body in greater detail from a distance. We move further away, closer, then further again, noting how she becomes incoherent, muted, then finally understood, depending on where you stand, the angle at which you look. The room responds to the brilliance, and it is brilliant. But I'm frustrated that artists spend so much time articulating details only to ask the world to step back and see us through illusions we've created. Why can't I just say I've lost someone I love? Someone who couldn't look past my flaws, and now I'm writing this stupid poem to ignore that simple fact. Titian must have suffered reddening the velvet curtain, carving out the edge between Danae's hip and thigh. Light is the same as language. The technique of blurring paint, no different than metaphor or the sleight of hand I just used when I said it was the artifice that bothered me, and not the fact that I am no different from the painter having asked everyone for distance. Thinking my errors could be accepted if placed purposefully in poems, objects witnessed from afar. Even now, reader, this poem is only a fragment of some wound I have had to admit, erase, then dress up to show you. But I do like the painting. Danae reposed, summoning, her breasts pale as a dove's underwing exposed in lambent light. Pablo explains that in Danae's myth, Zeus sensed her desire and came to her through a gold shower falling from the sky. The truth is, what actually frustrates me is Danae, her autonomous pleasure, her imperfect body beautiful. My wound is wanting to know how it feels to be a woman that desiring, that even a God, knowing all your flaws, would still shatter his world to reach you. Okay, I think I'm just going to read two more. So I'm actually going to read a poem from the chapbook because a friend of mine recently read both of them in tandem and ripped me for an edit I made in this poem that now exists in someone else's hunger, which is a testament that sometimes you can revise too much. So listen to your inner voice. And I won't give myself away, but he said in this version of the poem, I don't flinch. And I want to be a person in the world who flinches less. So this is a true story about this mouse that fucking haunted us. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but haunted us in our apartment. It was terrible. And we called him Lazarus. Lazarus. How many of y'all have ever had a mouse in your apartment if you live in New York? Oh my God, isn't it terrorizing? It's horrible. Okay, sorry, I'm like re-giving myself PTSD as I revisit this. All right, Lazarus. The name I gave the mouse that made its home in mine. The only thing I hated more than the way it scurried like a shadow I never saw but sensed was the beast I became because of it. Cowed, I knelt on the floor like a saint, searching for proof of its presence. With my lover gone, this time for good, I learned to bait and set traps, needle springs into sockets, into mouse-sized holes. One night, I woke to a clamp snapping shut and was happy when I found the body, as if I'd done a good deed. Like wind, its breathing stirred, then slowed, a tiny heart valve closing. The way its mouth hung open. The dark fur of its spine, bristled from shock, stood sharp as barbed wire. I tried to feel sad, human, but I was learning to let go. The spear of the trap glinted with light dribbling in from the moon. Paul says, freedom is learning to let those who've hurt you walk away. But this is how I know I'm flawed. I wanted it to die. Many nights I dreamt it would crawl into my bed, my mouth, the way a man I trusted did. What could I do besides stand there in the blood, watching it squirm, then still? For once, I felt like the champion of my life. Finally, I bent down to sweep it into the black bag of oblivion, but then the mouse sprung up to life, blitzed forward toward escape, desperate as a violet, or desperate as a vagrant who begins and ends his life begging, as we all do when praying. Look, God, I'm still on my knees. Teach me to unfurl my fists. Let my hands be hands again. Okay, Thank you all so much. Thank you, PSA, for having us all out. Thank you, all of you, for coming to listen to poetry on a Friday. It means the world. If you can and want to buy books, please do support your local artists. We need help. And yeah, I can't wait to hear Cecily read, and it's been such a pleasure. So this poem is just fun. Let me find it. And I don't want you all to worry about me, so I'm going to read it if I can find it. And this is also based off a story. So during COVID, I started to do Zoom therapy to work through some of this trauma. And my therapist was like, you should just start dancing. You just turn off all the lights and start dancing and start, relearning your body again. And I got addicted to it. Like, it was like this secret, sacred little time I would spend with myself, and no one was there. And I lived in this 400 square foot studio in Hell's Kitchen. And this was before it was like TikTok was cool, or it was normal to do selfie shit. And I had posted a video one night of me like dancing salsa by myself in my apartment. And my mom calls me and she's like, "Hey, Mama, what's good? Are you okay?" I'm like, yeah, what's up? She's like, "Okay, I'm just checking on you. Are you on drugs?" Like, and then I had secondhand embarrassment for myself so vigorously, I like immediately deleted it, and I was mortified. But this poem is inspired by that, and it's called Milagros, which is miracles in Spanish. Milagros, or self-portrait at 28. Alone in my studio apartment in New York, I dance to Burna Boy y reggaeton and post a video of myself online. My mother calls to ask if I'm on drugs because it's difficult for anyone to believe a woman who lives alone might just be happy shimmying in her skin the way the stars shake and ricochet just before they burst into the beautiful catastrophe of nothingness. In true poet's fashion, I have to say, I don't care what they think. I have to build this analogy out of language for you to believe I'm like the stars. I know my ancestors would have danced with me in quarantine because Cuba, like New York, is an island where everyone is lonely and everyone is grateful for their little bit of nothing, and joy is not earned but made. How else would we have bachata if it weren't for sorrow? Distant lovers finding each other's bodies under the gold-hazed rim of a rum-shocked drink which they sipped and spilled wherever they turned, whenever they danced, when they dipped, when they groped, when they kissed. When the congas, like familiar heartbeats, thumped like thunder, thumped as if to say, "Step here, breathe, hold one another." Haven't I been there? Been so hungry, I was reckless? Felt so abandoned in my body, I let any man hold me so I could pretend his hands were the hands of my first love sliding down my hips. Listen, all I'm trying to say is, this world feels like an incomplete phase of the moon minus beauty. All I'm saying is what my people in the Caribbean have always known to be true. That a slick melody strummed against a summer sky rhythming is key to setting you free. Of course, when Burna Boy blares, I'm a hurricane spiraling. Of course, tocar means to make music and to touch. When I strum the impossible instrument of my skin, I'm a cello humming light, doing what I must to shake the night sky from my bones. My therapist says it takes years to shake a trauma from the body. But here's what suffering, the combustive bodies of stars have taught me. Burning is the only way some of us can get clean. The problem is, sometimes I forget this. And when I start to feel this way, when I begin to face the hard truth that I might not ever be deeply loved by anyone ever again, that it might just be me and this brown body alone forever in this home, well, I turn on my music and let the bass snake up my leg because I still love the ruckus it causes. The chaos of my hips, like prayer releasing something, like prayer revealing my sloppy, ineffable heart to the gods. Oh, reader, how else can I admit this? All I want is to be held. All I want is for you to come closer and dance with me. Yes, dance with me, right here, right now, in this shitty kitchen light. And see if you don't feel free once reminded that our fabulous, infinitesimal lives, flickering, 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 are just like the stars. Bright, musical miracles that make it okay to say we are. Thanks, y'all.
Wow, thank you so much, Isabella. Hell yeah, that was cool. That was a great reading. We have one more reader tonight before we turn off all the lights and dance together, which is... yeah, our final reader is Cecily Parks. Parks is the author of 3 poetry collections, including The Seeds, which will be published by Alice James Books in October. The recipient of a Poetry Society of America Chapbook Fellowship and the Lucille Medwick Memorial Award, she is the guest editor of Best New Poets 2025 and the editor of the anthology The Echoing Green, Poems of Fields, Meadows, and Grasses. Her poems appear in The New Yorker, A Public Space, The Nation, The New Republic, several editions of the Best American Poetry, and elsewhere. She teaches in the MFA program at Texas State University and lives in Austin. Of Parks's newest book, The Seeds, which we have right there, poet Naomi Shihab Nye writes, "Magnificently delicate and wildly strong all at once, these poems are perfect precision of living and seeing, shaped into lines." Please join me in welcoming Cecily Parks.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to everyone at the PSA for having me. Brett, Parker, Matt, Sally, thank you for that introduction. Isabella and David, it's just so nice to be able to read with you. A privilege to be here, as I said. Parker invited me to read 2 poems from my chapbook, which is now 20 years old. But if Taylor Swift has taught me anything, it's that I can be kind to my previous eras. My chapbook came out in 2005. It was I can't even underestimate what a big deal it was for me at the time then and in retrospect. I wrote down some feelings about it, but my sense was that I was ready to publish a group of poems, but not a book of poems. And the opportunity that the chapbook gave me was to kind of test my faith in what I was doing. And it was just such an amazing opportunity. Where I was in my poetry career wasn't really a poetry career yet. And so it felt like just this amazing stepping stone into something that I really wanted to do. And not only that, I just got to have this amazing book. It just as a material object, it's so beautiful, inside and out. And the chapbooks continue to be that way. So I just feel like eternally grateful for the program and what it continues to offer poets. And I just wanted to thank the Poetry Society of America for doing that and celebrating it. I've measured almost every poetry publishing experience that followed against this experience, and it set a really high bar. Okay, this chapbook is about women's experiences in the American West, kind of set against the backdrop of an American West infused by masculine mythologies, tough geography, vicious rivers, mountains, and weathers. This poem is called Vessel. Little canoe, you predict paddling, rapids, and pockets of still water. The river bends for you. along swallow-perforated sandstone, past the cow skull flush with lupin. Trembling, the lens of your shadow steals along the river bottom, through barbed garlands of wire, over the ghost-quick trout knifing up from the darkness, as if they would kiss your belly, were they not afraid. Erosion surrounds us, homesteads slump in the sagebrush. A rusted-out Studebaker has come to the river to drink, and you are, against so many ticking cottonwoods, the only perfect shade of green. Sleekest waterborne creature, no matter how many times the river doubles back on itself, balks at the salt of the sea. Little canoe, my body is a hand in your swaying hand. You hold me like someone who knows how this will end. This next poem was written around 2004 when I learned that the largest North American pelican colony, white pelican colony in the world, in North Dakota. I remember this at the time, but I had to look it up again for this reading. It was a time when all the pelicans left this colony, and no one had really a reason for it. And so this poem is in the voice of the people in that community. When the pelicans vanished, forego a generation, the weather may have hissed, the slant of sleet leveling. If feathers clouded the sky, the cant of our roofs obscured their fall, we may have taken them for snow. If there were frenzied calls, we didn't hear them. Condemned to wandering, the birds had chosen a most clandestine kind. The lake they left, seldom broken, bristled in the Arctic wind. The whipped sedge betrayed no course of flight, no end, and cool eggs dotted the shores, unnerving us, men with wives, children, A-frame homes in the flatlands. If we wondered what to blame for the bird's absence, it was not for long. The air swelled with spring, snakes ate the eggs, and there were always other birds, other lakes. Now I will read 3 poems from the Seeds. The Seeds marks a time in my life when I moved to Texas. I moved to Texas a little over 10 years ago for a job there. I had twin daughters around the same time, and I had this uncanny experience of moving to a place, wanting deeply to understand it, as I was building a home in it, not literally, metaphorically, sort of like my home was built, but I had moved into it and was trying to learn where I was. And having these daughters that I was sort of in the position of trying to teach, but really identifying most with their unknowingness. And the house was old, is old. 100-year-old window. I wanted the 100-year-old window to open, as I assumed it had for many people before I lived in this house and thought to put a desk beside it. It was stuck. Its watery glass gave onto hackberry branches and thick black power lines, and by way of its delicate blur of the scene, made the eyes turn and return to it, like a woman everyone looks at, as if looked at long enough, she might be seen through and therefore invisible. The window did not grant me the permission I thought a window, no matter how antique, owed me, which was the permission to have hackberry-cooled air drift across my desk while I write the word hackberry, a name I learned after a storm splintered one of the tree's limbs, and I called an arborist to saw it off. Because of its crowded, easily broken branches, the hackberry is trash, the arborist told me, and offered to remove it altogether, even though it cooled the house and, as I later read, is one of the first trees to grow on scarred earth. When I called the carpenter to fix the window, I learned that it was operated by pulleys and ropes with cooperating cylindrical weights hidden in the wood frame on each side of the sash. It seemed cruel and just that even when I learned how the window worked, its workings still denied me sight of them. And when I learned about the hackberry, it was an invitation to destroy the tree. You'll say I only pay attention to things when they're broken, and I'll say too late. At sunset, the window can look like water a wounded animal has walked through. Some days I'm the animal, some days I wound it. It rarely snows in Texas, but it did one December. And in that time, kind of that same month, I discovered that Anne Sexton's papers are at the Ransom Center at the University of Texas in Austin, where I live. And I saw her papers for the first time. December. It was never supposed to snow here, and yet it was snowing. Big flakes tearing down over the Edwards Plateau like the sky had crumbled. My friend and I drank cold wine while our children played inside with masks on a big white bed. Another afternoon, my daughters sang a song about lords and camp that I didn't understand, but they didn't like me to ask what it meant, and instead of answering, rolled down the hill in their pajamas. Their first secret. Then, first bright red manicure, first chipped nail, first note taped to the door saying, "Don't come in." I went to the museum instead and stared a long time at the draft on which Anne Sexton had scrawled, "At last I found you, you funny old story poem," and felt a happy envy, happy for her, but not for me. Then, first time on ice skates, chicking around the rink, a string of beads draped over one daughter's head and my gold necklace still tangled by the sink. Snow rolled over the prairie and held the fence shadows when we threw golden hay to the ponies who lived outside all winter. The black and white barn cat was still alive and ate nervously in the garage, where snow chains glittered on the floor. One night, I told a restaurant it was my husband's birthday, and they gave us a sundae. It was his birthday, and at this point, we were far from the Edwards Plateau. I can't remember when we left for that trip, but I know on the last day of December, we had to go home. And in the airport, waiting for the plane, I arranged our winter coats so that mine was holding everyone else's. This will be my last poem. Thank you all for being here one more time. It's really wonderful to be at the PSA. This poem is called Burning Creek. In the course of writing it, I learned that the Crayola color chart has 19 shades of blue. And Burning Creek is a real creek in Texas, but I've never seen water in it. So to me, it's just a creek bed. Burning Creek. The creek bed without water made the mother suggestible. The cleft left by histories of water now held rank grass, rocks, and snaked through oaks. She made a note to conjure the creek bed when she next swore allegiance to the imagination, the thinking that thinks this bed once held water that gave its sound to the grove. A trickle, then a roar, like the fire the creek was named for. Which image of motherhood would she choose? Motherhood as water or bed? Motherhood as the event or the shape it left? Not a golden-cheeked warbler, not a cardinal, not an undulant shade. The answer she looked for in the creek bed wasn't there, and it was the never finding that she was a little bit in love with, because it tethered her to grass and rocks, and to the prairie coneflower, prickly poppy, and desert chicory wobbled over by wind. The next day came walls of rain, and the creek she knew would fill with water that dragged the long stalks of grass under. But by then she was gone from the grove where she could have seen the creek split itself around rocks and send frail twigs spinning downstream. Instead, she was home, where there was a children's table and children asking for blue, and from the bucket of crayons and markers, she had to choose. Violet blue, blue violet, blue marble, sky, blue moon, midnight, maximum blue, little boy blue, blue bonnet, cornflower, celestial blue, bluebell, periwinkle, indigo, larkspur, wild blue yonder, robin's egg, cobalt blue, green blue, blue green, teal, mermaid tail. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecily. Can we have just another round for all of our readers? Thank you. And now please hang out and talk to each other and buy a book. And yeah, we're gonna start moving chairs. That is not to get you to leave, it is to encourage you to stay. We're just gonna get them out of the way. So thank you so much for coming, and yes.